The perfect crisis. Let's get into this. All right. You might have heard me say this before, but I believe we are at war as a society, and that we used to be a nation of owners and we are now a nation of serfs and owned. And I am tired of seeing our communities littered with big conglomerate signs, with companies that don't care about our communities, from CEOs that have never stepped foot in our towns. And this is not an American phenomenon. This is a global phenomenon. I want more small businesses every single day where the owner actually knows your name and the dollars come back to the community. I don't want to run for office. Could you think about anything worse than being a politician and having to play that game? What I think actually makes real difference, which is why I am doing all of this, and it is not for me to get rich. We make our money off of buying businesses. The reason why we do all of this is because I want this. And guess what? 60 cents of every dollar when you own a small community business goes to the local community instead of the big conglomerates. And so I want more of you guys like Emily. The problem is there are less of you guys. The size difference between the really, really big in the US and the small is growing. That red line is showing you that Walmart and Target are owning more and more of our communities, and we aren't. And see, the problem with that is not just that the CEOs never step into our communities. It's also that these companies get all this funding from, let's say, venture capital like crazy. And then what happens is the second that the market turns, they start laying off people. This is 250,000 people laid off year to date in just tech. This number is 1/10 that in small businesses. So I believe if we don't take action, all of us on this call today, the world looks a lot darker. This is why I am willing to publicly be online. This is why I'm willing to take as much shit as I do. This is why I'm willing to spend my husband's birthday doing this with you guys, although he does get a party tonight, so there is that. It's because I think we are in the midst of a great wealth transfer, and they can transfer to one of two groups: people like you and me, or the KKRs, Blackstones, and Carlyles of the world. Mark my words, come November and the presidential election in this country, which ripples across the world, you will hear those companies' names again and again and again. And that is because they are starting to own everything. And it will accelerate because we have 75 baby boomers that are going to retire by 2030. 10,000 of them retire a day. They own 50% of small businesses. That's $5.1 trillion in SMBs changing hands, which means that over the next 25 years, we have $68 trillion worth of asset change, not just small business change, but assets change. And so we have this crazy market around us. We have this huge generational wealth transfer. And increasingly, I think we're coming into a recessionary environment. And this is when a lot of people say, well, shouldn't we not buy a business given that? Well, if all these small businesses are closing, don't you think that we might get deals on them because they could either close and have to pay money, or they could sell or transfer and you could pay them money? We have one methodology called the bathwater method, where we buy small businesses that are closing for $0 and just a percentage of future upside. The ways and structures are endless if you know what to do. I truly believe that those who know what to do in these environments will be the ones that get the opportunities. Because one of my mentors back in the day at one of the private equity firms I now like to talk badly about said it's a thing that is true, which is when times get hard, the unprepared transfer their money to the prepared. Let that sink in for a second. When times get hard, the unprepared transfer their money to the prepared. This is a truth. And we are going to have this whole generation of owners who are tired and older and they're ready to transfer. And you guys can own them, or the really, really big guys do. And if you say, well, what about their kids? Look what happens. Most small businesses don't survive generational transfer. Not one generation, but certainly not 2 or 3. And most small business owners do not even have a successor. 47% do not. So you can actually be what Emily said. This is something our community believes it's different than any other community I've ever seen, which is I don't actually just care that you get rich. If you're a bad person, I don't really want you to get rich. We have a no assholes policy in contrarian thinking. I want you to be better than the bad bosses we all had. That's my ask of you guys and us for teaching you, is that you don't take advantage of a seller. You grab their hand and you hold them through the transfer of the business that they built that you now get to profit off of for the rest of your life. That's incredible. We were sold lies by those on high that the boomers are a bad generation or the millennials are a bad generation because they wanted us fighting. They didn't want us united. And we are going to change that. Because in this small business land under 10 million, what typically happened before? Well, the big guys knew this. They knew that if they just kept doing what they were doing, these small businesses would die off because the baby boomers were retiring or getting older. Nobody that's smaller knew how to do acquisitions at scale. The big guys couldn't do acquisitions at scale because it's hard to scale that many companies for it to be meaningful for them. So they just let them die and then they steal market share. Easier to steal market share than it is to do small acquisitions. So that's why we buy businesses under 10 million that are not competing with private equity and that allow us to do these creative financing deals. Because it turns out, am I getting into yours? Oh no. And it turns out that the more you know, the luckier you get. The more you know, the luckier you get. And that preparation turns into luck. And the way that I know this is Brittany couldn't be on today, but Brittany owned a gym in Dallas during COVID. And do you guys remember COVID? Were gyms doing well? You can tell me in the chat. We all know the answer. No, but she learned deal making from us. And Brittany actually ended up being able to acquire her competitors in what I call a fire sale acquisition during the downturn. So that means when everybody else was having decreased profits, Brittany was able to grow hers without going and finding one new client, except going and acquiring instead. Now, all the money and all the risk is in implementation, but just you knowing that, just me planting that little seed in your head, if you are an owner during a downturn and you start to hear about your competitors going under, you start to see the world differently, don't you? You start to see your competitors as your future acquisitions, which will change everything for you. And the reason I want to stop here for a second, and actually, Josh, are you going to share your screen on this one?
Yeah, I think maybe it's probably best if you just unshare and then I'll quickly share.
Cool. The reason that I want to talk about that change in methodology and that change in perception is because I want you to open your brain for what Josh is going to talk about. I have never in all my years of finance and private equity seen anybody talk about what we call the quiet seller methodology, how to buy companies that aren't even for sale before they know they want to sell, and in a way that makes the owner feel like thanking you. And you're only going to be able to get a taste of this today, but I think it's going to be one of those paradigm shifts that you can't unsee once you see. All right, I'm going to shut up now, Josh.
Awesome. Guys, I'm really passionate about this next presentation. I want to tell you guys this earlier when, I don't know if you're all here yet, when Cody introduced me at the beginning of this, and she described me as an acquisition expert. I absolutely wouldn't describe myself as that. But what's really interesting about this is like, just what you guys are learning here today, you'll probably already know 99% of what everybody else knows on this stuff. And then put aside training on this for a couple of years, you're really going to be up there. And that's what I've been able to do. And what I'm going to show you right now, I don't take credit for any of it. It's just really important I say this, guys. I don't want to be like, hey, look at me, look who I am. I am just a product of my mentors. And it is just a result of me being smart enough to get in the right rooms. And then it's just kind of osmosis from there, right? I'm around the right people. And if you hang out with, 9 successful people, you're likely to be the 10th. That was what happened for me. So what I'm going to do right now, this is, I feel, so I'm going to speak for myself for a second. And I think there's a lot of you that are going to be able to relate to me here. My biggest limiting belief was where to find the business, where to find the deal, because truthfully, I feel like that's kind of the most important part. Like, when they say you make your money when you buy, we usually hear that around real estate. I would argue that a lot of that is very true with business buying. It's all about the deal that you buy and how to find really good deals. And for me, with my background in marketing and sales as a negotiation, which I'm going to break down right here, I had a lot of skill sets that I needed to learn how to repurpose. I needed to learn how to repurpose in a more leveraged way in a way that could generate seller leads. And this presentation, if that's your limiting belief, is like, well, I don't have a friend that's going to refer it to me, or, I don't know, this person in a networking, et cetera. Well, I'm going to show you how you can know literally no one. You could have zero network, land anywhere on planet Earth, and be able to generate really good deals, right? So let me go ahead and share my screen here. Give me 1 second if I present.
All right, let's also give a little love to Josh in the chat.
Can you guys see this okay? Sorry.
For us today. Yes, we can see it perfectly. You're rocking and rolling, man. All
right, guys. So this is what we call the quiet seller methodology, which is how we buy companies that aren't even for sale. And in this segment right here, like I said, I'm going to show you how to generate these sellers. But I also think there's a lot of questions around, what do you say to them when you find them? What do those conversations look like? What is that process? I've seen so many people ask questions today on, how do you negotiate the valuation? How do you negotiate the multiple? How do you negotiate the term? And it's something that I could literally talk on all week in here, but I'm going to give you some of what I feel are the most valuable nuggets on those topics. Right now, one of the lines that Cody says often to me is, she said, the more you know, the luckier I get. I've also heard that from a mentor a long time. He said, the harder I work, the luckier I get. And I couldn't agree more, because when you take action, when you do the work, when you learn the knowledge, when you get the exposure, when you know what's possible, all of a sudden it seems like opportunities are coming out of nowhere, and it feels almost lucky, but it's not. It's because the preparation that you've had. And there's a principle called Pappert's principle. This was a philosopher or a teacher, or mathematician is the right word to describe him, from MIT, an extremely smart individual. And I just love this law, I guess you would describe it as. He says some of the most crucial steps in mental and personal growth are based not simply on acquiring new skills, but in acquiring new ways to use what one already knows. And I think that's a message that's going to resonate with a lot of you here today, especially if you already own a business, or if you already think you're good in sales. Let me see in the chat box, actually. Let's just do a real quick test before I start. Who here considers themselves to be pretty good with marketing? Pretty good with lead generation? I'm going to go through a couple different things. Just put yes in the chat box if that's you, right? A lot of people. Who here would say that you guys consider yourselves to be pretty good with sales or negotiation? Put it in the chat box here. A lot of people. Now, if you're not one of those two things, let me ask you this. How many of you think that you're trustworthy, you have integrity, and you're pretty good at making relationships? Because that is a massive part of this, by the way, as well. Pretty much everyone's saying yes to one of those three categories. And so what this is going to show you is how you can repurpose some of those skill sets for business buying. Now, I remember years ago, guys, this is how this kind of came to be. Just a quick analogy to propel us into this right now. I remember years ago, I was learning about house flipping and real estate investing, right? Just kind of a random deal. I'm learning about real estate investing. I want to be financially smart and make the right decisions for my future. And what I thought would happen if I wanted to flip a house, I thought I would go to Zillow. I thought I would find a really crappy looking house. I would buy it and renovate it. The emphasis I put was on construction. I thought it was like a contractor job. I said, okay, what is the emphasis? What is the skill set? The house, the part is easy. You just renovate it. But guys, that's how you lose a lot of money, because a lot of us probably know here that that's not how professional real estate investors operate, right? Now, let me see in the chat box here. How many of you guys, and I'll make sense of this in a second here, how many of you guys know someone that owns a property? They own a primary residence, right? How many people know somebody that just owns a single house? It should be probably most everyone on here. But would you consider them a real estate investor? Would you consider them a professional, savvy real estate investor because they own a house? Everyone's saying no. So my question for you is, why not? Right? Why not? Why aren't they not a professional investor if they just own a property? Well, what are the things that you have to know to actually be a professional in that space? Well, here's the things that I would argue. You need to know how to strategically acquire assets under market value. You need a specific buy box and know how to analyze deals. This is what separates the amateurs from the professionals, right? The people with the knowledge. They understand creative financing and other people's money. Their plan to generate equity and income isn't just buying and waiting, right? not professional investors. They buy a property and the only way they make money is waiting 10, 15 years or whatever it is, right? But you can find something with additional ways to generate income. And I'll tell you guys this, it all starts with finding the right deal, because you make your money when you buy. And everything on the screen right here, guys, is exactly the same when it comes to being an acquisition entrepreneur. If you do something like a hobby, it will pay you like a hobby. And the best acquisition entrepreneurs find the best deals because they master the deal origination process and they create what we call proprietary deal flow. This is how to create proprietary deal flow, generating sellers that nobody even know that exist. So you have no competition and you're the only one trying to buy that company. Would you guys like to see that? Right? Now, there are a bunch of ways, and you've even heard one of these examples, that you could buy a business online. It's actually pretty simple. There's a lot of these different websites. What do all of them have in common, then, by the way, though? And to be super clear, I am not bashing these strategies. They work. You heard from someone today that bought a business here. But think about some of the challenges with these public websites that I know for a fact at least 3,500 people know of, right? You guys are all on the website. You all know of these, or you're all on the webinar and you all know these websites, right? There's all different kinds. And by the way, we give those to you in our community anyways. We give you guys a bunch of different brokers. We give you all the different websites because there are so many ways to generate deals. But we're going to talk about off-market sellers, right? We're going to talk about the advantages of finding these deals that everyone else doesn't know about. And let me see in the chat box super quickly, what are some things that come to mind when you think of off-market sellers? Because I'm going to break down a strategy that is one of the #1 ways that private equity firms find their deals. What do you think of when you think off-market sellers? Like, what types of ways can you generate those? Right? See, the common things that I hear is networking groups. You could go to, business conferences. You could get it from friends and family. You could get them from social media. You could call your competitors. These are all actually great examples, right? But it's not that predictable. You don't have that much control of it, right? So why do we think that having proprietary deal flow and working with off-market sellers can generate better deals for us? These are the reasons. These are the things that you should concern yourself with, right? First of all, there's no competition, like I just alluded to earlier. These are the reasons you want to figure out how to have proprietary deal flow, right? There's no competition. #2, more control over deal criteria. I'll give you an example of this. I've gone on these websites. I've scoured them. I've spent a lot of time on that. And it's really kind of up to chance if there's a deal in my buy box, right? Because let's say that I'm looking for a certain business that's doing a certain amount of revenue, right? Doing a certain amount of revenue, and it has a certain profit, and it's in a certain area next to me. Well, maybe there's a bunch of deals like that. Maybe there isn't. And if there's only a couple and there's all these other people that are, trying to acquire that business, there's a lot of competition and you don't really have that much control over it. I want to be able to figure out the buy box and reach out directly to people that match that, right? So there's a much larger addressable opportunities. With what Cody just said with the perfect crisis, guys, there's so many sellers that don't even know that they can sell. It's a limiting belief of their own. Imagine how many limiting beliefs that we have on the buyer side. We all want to buy businesses. Think about how many limiting beliefs they have. Who would want to buy my business? How am I going to sell it? I'm the only operator. Who's going to pay me all this money? Right? There's all of these questions that they have. So because of that, they don't actually even go to sell their business. Couple more. No broker representation. No broker representation. It's direct to seller. Now, I don't know about you guys, but if I'm acquiring something, I want to talk to that person directly, especially as a negotiator, especially as sales, and especially just to get to know the truth. I want to hear it myself. Now, guys, I'm not bashing brokers because we actually have relationships with them, and there's some really great ones out there. I'm not bashing them, but I want you to know this. Their job is to generate a competitive bidding environment. Their job is to get the absolute best price and maximize the price for the seller. And they don't really let you have that direct relationship during that whole process. Okay. Next is much faster process with additional efficiencies. You guys heard a couple examples. I don't know if it's typical. I would say it probably isn't, but on average, it's much faster dealing directly with the seller. And it's because with brokers and all these online websites, there's a much more formalized process. You guys might be familiar with some of these terms. A lot of the times you want to sell your business, you go to a broker, they have to create the marketing material. They create what's called a confidential information memorandum, which is basically like an offering memorandum to market your business. They put it out there. They go through the whole marketing process. They get indications of interest from all these different people, and then they start the process. It's bloated and it takes a lot longer instead of you just reaching out directly to them and getting the business, right? And getting right into the conversations that you want, right? Kingsley said, brokers are motivated to get paid. Well, that's a really interesting thing that you just said, Kingsley, because let me just ask you this, right? You said they're motivated to get paid. Do you guys think that it's going to be really hard to do a seller financing deal when there's a broker involved that wants to get a certain amount of money up front? I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm really not. I've seen it done. I've heard about it being done very often. But my only question is it harder? And I think it'd be hard to say no, right? So the way that we like to generate off-market sellers that don't even have their businesses for sale is direct outreach with cold email, okay? There's a lot of people on here, I'm sure, that have exposure to cold email, which is awesome. You should be really excited because you didn't even know that you have one of the greatest skill sets ever to generate good deals. I'm going to show you some of the nuances involved. There's a lot of you that don't know what cold email is, other than the fact that it's kind of self-explanatory, but you don't know the process or the strategy. You're going to be surprised with how easy this actually is. Maybe I'll use the word simple instead of easy. Now, why do we love cold email and the direct outreach process? Okay. The reason, somebody said that's my job right now. Well, you're going to love this, Jesse. First of all, it's very leveraged and practical. It's very leveraged, right? It kind of ties into the second thing. It's way less time consuming than networking events, trade shows, meetups, conferences, etc. Now, you can do that and you could find deals like that, but it requires you going in person, which is typically a pretty big investment of time, right? It's also easier than cold calling, right? Cold calling's rough. We'll just leave it at that. It's rough. By the way, I just want to tell you guys this. I cut my teeth on cold calling. My first business, I built 100% cold calling. I made a couple hundred dials every single day, lights off with no shoes, because that's what made me feel like I was in the zone. Don't ask me why, you figure out what works. Regardless, it's rough, and I was doing it all day long, right? Next thing is it's extremely inexpensive. For a couple $100, you get a domain, your email set up, and you buy the data, which I'm going to walk you through how to do all of this. Maybe you get a sending tool if you want to start automating some stuff. Next thing, it could be delegated. You can't really delegate cold calling. Well, you could, but you're not going to be able to duplicate yourself on the phone. Kingsley says, Josh has been in the cold call trenches. I really have. We'll talk about them more another time, maybe. Because I actually enjoyed it, which is what kind of makes me a freak, but we'll talk about it later. Different webinar, right? And you can't delegate it when you're going to events, right? Lastly, it's much more, or not lastly, next, it's much more effective than these other strategies. And it's scalable. Now, there's a lot of people on here that probably just want to buy their first business, which is awesome because you only need one. There's a bunch of other people that are motivated overachievers. Maybe you own a business currently, and you're thinking about multiple acquisitions. You want to be a full-time acquisition entrepreneur. Well, that is what is so great about this strategy is it's scalable, it's predictable, it's repeatable. And I'm going to smash one more limiting belief just for the people on here that are really, really experienced with cold email. The response rates are unbelievably higher. Okay. I am somebody who sent 16,000 cold emails last month, right? There's people that spend hundreds of thousands. So I'm not saying that I'm the best in the game, but I do a lot of it. And in a lot of industries, you get like a 0.003 average response rate, positive response rate. It is so much freaking higher. And I think we could just use logic to tell us why. Mark says 0.10 exactly. Here's the reason why it's so much higher. Who doesn't want to hear about somebody that wants to buy their business? Right? It's unbelievable the response rate involved in this. And I'm going to say one last thing that isn't on the screen. It takes away all your excuses. You guys, maybe you love me for this, maybe you hate me for it. You can no longer use the excuse that you don't know anybody, so you can't buy businesses. You can no longer use the excuse that you don't have relationship capital or that you're not well connected or that all these other people got referrals, because one of the main ways to generate leads requires none of those things. Here's a process. Number one, you got to get really, really clear on your acquisition criteria. I'm going to skip through that part. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. Main reason being because if you guys were listening earlier, Cody went over a lot of that in depth, but you have to get clear on the type of companies that you want before you reach out to them. Number two, we're going to, oops. Sorry about that, guys. I'm gonna go over these, and I'm gonna go over one at a time on each side. Number two is you have to come up with the target company attributes. How are you identifying these companies? Number three is you have to get the data. We also call it like list building if you're doing it in a larger way. Number four, come up with the outreach messages or the emails that you're sending. Number five, send with consistency. Most important word on the entire screen right now is consistency. And number six is that the call to action should be setting a call with a setter. Excuse me, that's supposed to say seller, which is really actually funny to me, but that's supposed to say set a call with a seller. And the reason I say that is because you are not going to buy someone's business on email, right? You're not trying to start the whole conversation and have a ton of exchanges. You're just trying to gauge interest, generate interest, and get on a call with them to start building some rapport, right? Now, when Cody's talking about buying businesses, just really quickly, we're going over the acquisition criteria. You want to target established businesses that have lasted the test of time. Like she said, 90% of businesses over 10 years survive. Everything she said earlier, we're not buying problems, we're buying profits. We like outdated businesses that aren't modernized, excuse me. So there's a lot of value add opportunity, the buy and build strategy. Now, here's another thing that you can do that I like to do, just kind of a financial framework for acquisition criteria, is if you come up with, remember she said there's four things that you need the cash flow to cover to buy the business. It needs to cover the operator. It needs to cover the debt service. It needs to have investment capital if you want to grow it a little bit. And it needs to have leftover enough for you. Okay. Enough for you. Now, so if you look at that and you think and you kind of reverse engineer, well, what is the income that I want to make? What is the spend that I want to grow? How much do I need to pay an operator? You can back into what is the total EBITDA that would need to have. Okay. Side note. I'm aware that debt service isn't baked into that, guys. It's just a little bit more complicated for the time that we have, but it barely changes that. And it's a variable thing depending on the way that you finance. Maybe it's 100% finance, seller finance, and you could bake that in, right? But this is the general mentality or methodology behind it. So if we say, okay, that means to cover those things, I need to buy a business doing 260 grand in profit. And let's say I don't want a business that has lower than a 20% margin because it's just too tight of a deal for me. That means the target revenue is going to be 1.3 million in revenue. Then if you try to think about, you don't really need the valuation part to reach out, but if you think about the average multiple that you're willing to pay or for the size of the business that you're going to buy, you would come up with the valuation range. I like going over this, guys, because I need to know in terms of company attributes when I'm reaching out to these businesses. Some people don't even think about how big does the business need to be, right? If you don't do this math and you go and buy a business that's too small, you're probably wrong to begin with. EBITDA stands for interest before earnings, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. In a really, really easy layman's terms, it's net profit, right? Just for a very quick answer, that's what it is. That's the bottom line of the business. That's what is left over after the expenses. Okay. Now, margin is profit margin, guys. All right, so target company attributes. So once you have an idea of the type of business you want to buy, you have to come up with ways that data could actually filter by that, because we're going to use data platforms to get these people's contact information, right? Sometimes it might be as easy as calling their website, but a lot of the times it's not, and we want their direct, right? We want their direct contact information. So these are some of the basic fields we want to know. We want to know what industry are they in? What is the revenue range? How many employees do we want them to have, right? How many years in business? Well, remember, guys, we're talking about 10 years. Cody she likes the older, the better because of the Lindy effect. You want to know the job titles, which is usually going to be the CEO, the owner, the founder, the location geographically, if that matters to you, and then any keywords that might be on their websites. You have to have these company attributes if you want to know how to find them using a data tool, right? Here's an example of that. There are so many different ones. I don't know if you guys know this. There are so many different ways that you could find all of these people's information. Zoom Info, Seamless, Apollo, ListKit, Contact Out, Store Leads is specific for e-com, and then Million Verifiers, how you could make sure that all of these are accurate. Now, I'm going to show you the one that we actually use in Contrarian, and one of actually Cody's software here in a second that simplifies this whole process. However, there is a lot of tools out there. And you can, once you're clear on your acquisition criteria, you can create a list and get all of the contact information, phone number and email of all of the different businesses that you would be interested in buying. Okay. Now, messaging framework. I'm just going to share a couple tips. This is not a cold email webinar or seminar. This is just showing how to use a really effective strategy to generate seller leads. First of all, you want to be brief and to the point, not super long stuff. You want it to be personalized and specific. I'm going to show you an example on the next slide. I call it the 5 C's for short communication hooks. Carrot, which means just kind of dangle some value. Curiosity, they want to hear more. Casual, nobody likes talking to a robot, or it's going to intimidate them if you're overly professional. Contextual, so they know what you're talking about. And if you can make it clever, it's a bonus, right? You want them to schedule a call and then value-based follow-up. Guys, don't be afraid to follow up with these people every now and then. Just don't spam them or the deal will never happen. Okay. I'm going to show you a couple examples right now of how I've done this, guys.
Hey, Josh, before you go into your examples, can you tell me what you texted me last night about your hit rate for a certain type of business that you were trying to buy? Do you remember?
What do you mean by the hit rate?
You were like, I reached out to X number of businesses to see if they were open to selling, and X of them responded to me that they were open to.
Yeah, guys. So here's what's crazy. And I think what makes it crazy and impressive is that the number is so low. It's not like this majorly impressive big number. So what I'm going to show you guys here is that I reached out to 4 businesses. 3 of them responded saying they were interested in selling. And I carried that conversation forward after the first call with 2 of them. I sent 4 emails.
The reason I wanted to bring this up is we're pros. Josh and I are looking to buy lots of businesses continuously in perpetuity to acquire a portfolio of businesses that does hundreds of millions of dollars or billions. And so what Josh is giving you right now is pro. If you want to take a process and take it continuously from A to Z and create your own Warren Buffett level portfolio, like I told you we're going to teach you about, this is one way to do it. But the other thing I want to tell you guys too is that if you're like maybe Emily, for instance, even though she's got a couple mil under her belt now in acquisitions, you might just want to be acquiring 1 to 2 companies. Can everybody on this webinar send 4 emails to business owners that you know? Does everybody on here know 4 business owners? If you were able to get 4 business owners email and then 3 of them responded to you, that's pretty wild, right? And so I just want to show you the spectrum. If you're not able to send 4 emails, I love you guys. Go get a fucking job. Don't buy a business. If you can't send 4 emails, this is not going to work for you. I hate to tell you. Yep. If you can send 4 emails, this might actually be a strategy that could work. And then you could scale it up and do hundreds of emails and outreach too. I just want to make sure that you understand the spectrum here
for
from
sure, Cody.
Portfolio to individual acquisition. All right. I love your next couple slides too. So thanks.
Well, I know I appreciate you clarifying that. I'll also say when I said I sent 16,000 emails last month, that was not for seller leads. That would be like an insane amount of unbearable conversations, right? I'm just showing you that you can leverage automation and do this at a really high level, but you only need 1. So you really don't need to send that many emails. So check this out, guys. These are real emails and screenshot. I covered up all the things that I thought were maybe confidential.
Yeah, okay. The only other thing I would add to Josh's Nibra's comment, gets job, proceeds to send more than 4 emails a day. That made me LOL. The other thing I would say is like one of the cool parts about this is like everybody knows more than 4 owners. If you've ever gone into a small business in your local area, if you've ever bought from a local if you've ever gone to laundromat, if you've ever gone to a car wash, if you've ever gone to a local coffee shop, you probably know them. But again, I think in order for this to work, Josh and I are really big on honesty. And if you can't send 4 emails, this isn't going to work for you. If you can't get creative enough to find 4 owners, this isn't going to work for you. If you can do those next 2 things, this community might be for you. But if not, you might just not be ready, and you can keep following along with all the free things. But I kind of want to push you guys a little bit because I think most humans are more capable than they think that they are. But I want to say that there's levels to this game. All right, Josh, back to you.
Awesome.
And yes, we tough love here, because that's the only way to make real money and impact over time. You know, if you want to go get like a back rub, you can talk to Chris, who also runs the company with me. He's nicer than I am.
All right, here we go, guys. I'm going to run through these next slides. I'll read them out loud because I know they're small. Okay. These are real emails. So opportunity for company name. That's all it said. Opportunity for company name. I said, hey, name, hope you're having a good weekend. I'm currently looking to invest in / buy another local production company doing between 1 and 5 million in annual revenue. I've been tracking your company's progress for years now, and I think you've done a great job building it up. Do you have any interest in discussing what that could look like? If not, maybe at least exploring synergies. Appreciate the time either way, right? And what I'm doing there, guys, I don't want a ton of resistance, which is why I added that last line. Okay, here's what I want to show you. I have to minimize these chat boxes and things for a sec. Look at the times over here. I sent it at 9:40 a.m. He responded same day that night, right? It's like he responded basically instantly, right? This is a weekend. He says, thanks for reaching out. Our company is continually exploring avenues for expansion, and mergers and acquisitions are indeed among our considered strategies. Let me know if you have some available time later this week. We could set up an introductory call. I appreciate your interest and look forward to collaborating. 1 out of 1, right? Let's look at the next one real quick. Are you open to this? Hey, name, I've watched company name for some time now. Congrats on the success. I'm currently looking to buy a production company to be between 1 and 5 million in revenue. Do you have any interest in discussing what that could look like? Either way, I'm sure there's a lot of synergy between our two companies and would love to chat. Looking forward to hearing back. He said, always down to chat, want to send more information. By the way, this one has entered into an NDA and has sent all the assets over. The only thing with this is that he was actually going out of town for over like a month and a half. I think he's back after the holidays. Why do you think I like that, by the way? Right? I like that. He's the business owner and he can take off over a month and it doesn't crash and burn to the floor, right? So that's the conversation with him. Now, check this out. Now, this is almost a whole other deal, but we talk about this a lot in the program with sweat equity deals, also referred to as consulting for equity. This is freaking awesome. This is like, I'm like actually surprised that you guys could see November 29th. Like this just happened. So I was able to share it with you today. I said sales for company name. This is a different one of my companies now, by the way, that I'm trying to do equity deals with. I said, hey, name, I came across your YouTube channel today and loved your offer. I followed your personal Instagram as well. And then I said a line about one of his competitors is confidential. And I said, and we've been looking for a recruiting brand to partner up with. Is this something you're open to chatting about? Or are you guys fully optimized on the sales side of things? Now, when you see that, it says received. Thank you, Josh. Right. Well, what's interesting, what you missed is I actually did call this guy right when I sent the email. And I told them, he said, what's the subject line? It just says sales for company name. It's that simple, right? So, well, somebody said this seems too good to be true. Well, let me tell you guys, just because they responded as an email doesn't mean I'm buying their business. I'm just showing you how awesome the response rates are and how interested people are to hear about it, right? But check this out. Check these next couple slides out. So I actually cold called him, said, hey, how's it going? Blah, blah, blah. I actually just sent you an email. I was on your YouTube channel right now, and I couldn't believe how impressive XYZ was. Now, guys, I have a cold calling skill set. I've done it for so many years. I don't even think about it. But I couldn't believe what he said. He was like, wow, you reached out with such ironic timing. We really need help in that area. Check this out. This is a text the same day, November 29th. I said, Josh Troy, CEO of my company. Great connecting name. Ironic timing. When you get a chance, shoot me some available times for a call on Friday with you and your partner. Looking forward to chatting more. That was November 29th. And I signed this deal on the 13th. By the way, that's through contract negotiations. That's 2 weeks from initial contact, from cold call to contract sign, in 2 weeks for a equity deal. This is a performance-based consulting for equity type deal where my business, the contribution that I add to their business. So this is another way you can do things, guys. My contribution to their business is so valuable to them that they're willing to partner with me on the company from a cold call. Okay. Again, is this typical results? Can this happen to everyone? Does this happen every time? Probably not, guys. But I'm just showing you real stuff that's happened in the last couple of weeks. This is what it looks like. All right. Now, a lot of you guys are asking, where do we get the data? How do you do this? How do you build the sequences? There's so many different tools in our community, guys. One of the companies that Cody owns is BizScout. that literally helps you get all of the data and build these campaigns and do the outreach for these seller leads, right? So you can look it up on your own if you want. Cody, is there any type of, how does that work with the community? I forget.
Basically, you get a bunch of discounts to the companies that we own, including VizScout. So this one's going to be cool too. A 2.0 version comes out the end of this year. And there's lots of cool things that we're doing. For this is another business I bought that we're scaling. So you can kind of see us do all of this live in action.
Awesome. And just because somebody asked, let me show you this really quickly. So this deal, this is a no money out of pocket deal, guys. And because of my skill sets and the contribution I had to offer, I was able to get into this deal. How many of you guys would like to know how to do those deals as well? Right? Maybe you have a business and that's kind of a growth play for you guys. Right? One of my favorite types of deals that I like to do. All right. Now, with all that same data, just a side note, you can take all of that same data and send postcards. This is one of our community members using that same data, using the same type of outreach strategy to off-market sellers. He creates a bunch of postcards and he sends them out. Really good way to do something different and get in front of these people, right? I know we keep talking about this, guys, and shortly, I think Cody will have a chance to be able to show you all the details and what it looks like. In the community, we give you guys all the playbooks, all the outreach scripts, the due diligence checklist, what to request of them, what to look at when you start the conversation, etc. Right? Which I'm going to show you guys right now. Now, here's one of the things that I am so passionate about. The amount of opportunity that you have will always be limited by your ability to recognize it. Can you just give me a boom if that's calling you out right now? It's so important for me. I'm in that bucket as well. It stays true for all of us. The amount of opportunity that you have will always be limited by your ability to recognize it. Guys, I'm nothing special. I'm not even close to anything in terms of experience that Cody has. And I'm showing you real deals that are happening right now. And the reason I say that is because even right now, you guys can see people are like, I don't believe it in the chat box. And it's just because they think, well, hold on a second. I don't have those opportunities around me, so it must not be true. But the amount of opportunity you have will always be limited by the ability to recognize it. Now, here's the thing.
Wait, Josh, can I jump in really quickly?
Yes.
It was perfect timing. You went to the slide and then Gail goes, I don't even understand what type of deal you've described. I'm in medicine, so I don't understand how you add value to the business, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And so I think this just goes to show this is very normal if you're feeling this right now. There's a phenomenon that happens when you buy a car, right? And before you buy the Porsche for the first time, you don't really see Porsches anywhere. And then the second you buy the Porsche, it's like Porsches were bought all around this country. They're all around you. You have a cognitive bias to understand and see something because you've told your brain that it's important. But the problem is you have to get the reps in before that you can recognize it all around. And so after this, we're going to do a Q&A after my section. And so think about this. If you're like, huh, I'm in a certain industry, I don't understand how to do a sweat equity deal, which is what Josh just described. I don't understand how to use an expertise for equity deal, which is also what Josh just described. We can play around with that during the Q&A segment. But this is so important. Once you understand how to do deals, you will not stop seeing them everywhere. It is the
You'll not stop seeing them. I mean, and by the way, everyone in the chat box, there's a lot of you guys saying reticular activating system. That's exactly right. Once you know what to look for, you all of a sudden start seeing it, right? And so what's so interesting about this when we talk about it, right? I did exactly 0 of these deals in almost a decade of being an entrepreneur. I did exactly 0, right? And then I did 4 of them in about 8 months after learning these strategies. So here's the question to think about right now. What changed? Did these deals not exist previously? And coincidentally, at the same exact time I learned it, they started existing? Or was I just not able to see it due to my lack of education? Was it the education that allowed me to open up the opportunities, right? That's what it was. I know that's what you guys are all doing today here as well. Now, the question that everybody has, I'm going to jump through this quickly so we could get to Cody's next section, which is going to be fire, which I am really excited for. What happens next once a potential seller responds? There was kind of a gap in that presentation. There wasn't. Well, let's talk about that for a second. So guys, I have like a 3-part strategy. It doesn't mean 3 calls. It doesn't mean 3 conversations. It's 3 parts. You might have multiple conversations as you go throughout that, but I really want to simplify it. Number 1 is an intro and discovery call. I set the call. Now, what do I do when I'm talking on that first conversation, right? First of all, it's just credibility and introduction, right? You have to make a friend before you can make a deal. nobody knows how much you know until they know how much you care. All these other cliche things that I could say, but you got to make a connection, right? You have to make a connection. It's all about trust, like we heard from Robert earlier. So I kind of spend some time doing that. I really take an interest. I let them talk a lot about their business. I want to hear about their accomplishments. I show empathy for how much they've done. And I can't believe how impressed I am with where they've taken the business to today. I let them talk and I learn about the business. I want to check the main boxes, right? Then I really want to find their motivation. That's going to be one of the most helpful things in the negotiation, is knowing why they would do the deal. I want to know what they want. Are they trying to retire? Do they have some health issues? Are they going through a divorce? Are they just tired of their business? Do they want to start something else? Do they want to move out of the country? There's a million different reasons. Well, maybe not a million, but a lot. And then I want to know their desired purchase price. Why do I want to get that on the first call, guys? Because I'm not interested in having 75,000 calls for somebody to say yes. So I'm kind of just filtering it. I don't show a strong opinion usually one way or another. I just want So have you thought about, what you would potentially want to get out of the business? Have you put any thought into that? A lot of times they say no, and then you just kind of start questioning things. And well, what do you think it would go for? I mean, I'm not going to hold you to it. I'm just curious. You know your business better than me. I try to get a number because I either know how unrealistic they are and I can make a decision off of that, or I could realize immediately that this has a very high chance that we're going to have a realistic conversation, right? And then I request the assets. I always request the assets, right? It's so important to request the assets on this first call. And the reason why is because you have to be able to prepare for the second call to move the conversation alone. So what are the assets that we request? The assets that we request is going to be as follows. Now, you could ask for more of them. I know Cody asked for a lot of stuff. You do deals differently. You do deals faster once you really get the hang of it. But these are the things that I like to know. I need to understand the business. How does the company run? What are the seller's responsibilities? I need to know that because they're not going to be involved anymore once that person leaves. What's the revenue profile? How do they generate revenue? What's the risk and exposure? Are there any lawsuits, right? You could screenshot this if you want. The income statements, because you got to see the financials of the business. I like to see a brand deck because if they have it, I like to see who they're targeting, right? I like to see how they're generating business, who's the ideal client profile. I just like to understand that. If they have any metrics around it, great. And then for me, I love to see the org chart and the role and responsibility matrix, because I need to know how the business runs. I want to have a quick understanding how it runs, right? These are just basic documents that I look at. Now, here's the thing. This is called what I like to describe as preliminary due diligence. You guys may have heard of that term. One of the biggest, somebody feels like I'm an athlete secretly. I'm not an athlete. Right. But I'm running through these deals. No. Okay. Is that a stupid joke? A dumb dad joke? It's a long day, guys. Give me a break. So preliminary due diligence, right? A big mistake is that people think that they're going to engage in a 30-day due diligence process to decide if they're going to buy the business. And that is so ass backwards, right? You want to take it at face value, get the information. What does it look like? And then say, if these things are true, this is how I would do the deal. If these things are true, okay? And I'm going to show you why that's important in a second. Number 2, you have the valuation call. You go over the clarifying questions, right? You go over the supporting evidence. Now, when you have that valuation call, you're just kind of getting a range from the seller and you want to get their reaction to that. Now, it's so important that you're just using the supporting evidence. You're making sure that what they sent you, if you have any questions on it, you want to understand if it's accurate, right? What is the transition plan? Are they willing to stay on? You basically need all the details of how you're going to go and structure the deal. What is the offer that you're going to present, right? Keyword here, take it at face value. You do not need to negotiate your ass off at this stage. And I'll show you why, right? I'll show you why. Now, in between this, you're starting to do the deal structuring and there's negotiation probably kind of throughout there, right? I'm going to actually... Well, I guess I'll go the negotiation.
Well, I was thinking, Josh, that we could save some of the negotiation part at the end of my section, because I think it'd be kind of cool for people to see how we would go back and forth live. So all this next part, what you want to see, understand from what Josh is showing you, he's showing you a timeline. Once you have a timeline, you have a roadmap, a GPS for where you want to go in deal acquisition, in deal structuring, due diligence. Remember those first 10 steps I showed you at the beginning? So we have checklists upon checklists for everything that, you know, I get when I want to do a deal. And then the steps that you need to take from the moment you figure out what kind of deal you want to buy to the moment you close to your first 90 days. So don't stress too much about this entire process. We have this outlined for you. What I think would be really interesting though, Josh, is if we took, there's a ton of levers, you know, how, once, like if you've ever worked a crane, like on a crane, you have a couple different levers, and one can make something go up and down or left and right or faster, slower, right? And so there's levers to negotiating a business. And I think seeing it live might be interesting between the two of us, Josh, and we go through some of the Q&A. What do you think about that?
I think that's great. What I want to do, let me show them step 3, but I'm going to skip the negotiation slides and we'll just go after that after yours. But let me just give them the complete picture real quick and we're going to go on.
Yeah, totally.
So I'm going to skip these guys. You're going to love it, but I'll do it here shortly. Because I do agree with Cody. It makes more sense for the flow. So I'm going to come back to all of this in a second. But the third call that you're going to have there, or the third stage that you would have, call it, is you're going to present that offer based on everything you know. And what's so important here is that the business isn't what it's worth because you want it to be worth that, because it's your opinion that it's worth that. It's all based on the assets they provided. It's all based on what the market is telling you. And by the way, it's a great dialogue to have. Hey, Jim, listen, I wish I could pay you more for this business. I really do. In fact, it would have been awesome if your business was doing 500 grand a month, as you previously told me, but it's not. And because of that, that means that it's worth this. And one of my favorite lines I like to say is, listen, Jim, I want to do fair deals. I want to be known for that. I'm not here to take advantage of anybody. And I'm committed to being reasonable. Are you? Because I think that if we're both reasonable and realistic, we can get this deal done. But if you ask me to do something unrealistic or unreasonable, it won't happen. And I know how much you want to do this deal because of what's going on right now, and because of the fact that you need to retire, and because of the fact that you don't have a succession plan. And I want to make that happen for you. And I'm going to come up as far as I can my way, but we have to stay in a reasonable zone, because I don't know who's going to do the deal the way that you're describing it. Right now, you know why that's so powerful is because there is no competition, because we're doing off-market deals. Okay, so we're going to touch more on this, like Cody just said, in a second, or a little bit later, because, you know, we could spend more time of it and have a Q&A. Cody, why don't I stop my screen, right, and have you share again? Does that make the most sense?
Yep, I think that's perfect. Let's do it. Yeah, and one thing that that I would add that Josh talked about before I jumped into my segment is the fun part about this is, you know, when you're like, I would recommend that you get in a group with a couple other people and you play around with these scenarios. And so you'll see Josh and I do it live, and it's not very complex. It's sort of like any other type of sales or just being a curious human, but it's really fun to role play. So we do 2 deal sourcing calls a month in the group. And one of those is sort of this role play scenario. So it's super fun. Okay. Can you stop sharing, please, Josh?
I absolutely can. And what I think would be awesome, Cody, and you're right about this, like you have a presentation that's going to be awesome right now. And then we can take a break after this one, so we have some more time to do the negotiation stuff. I think everyone would probably appreciate that.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that. Okay. So let me hammer through a few things you guys have been asking a ton of questions on, what I call my secrets to acquisition, like the top secrets I've learned from, now I'm going to tell you how old I am, which is never great, more than 2 decades basically of deal making. We're going to break into that really quickly. This next segment should take me like 10, 20 minutes. And then let's break. And then we will do Q&A. And then let's do the negotiation back and forth. I dig that.